to Upstage Downstage with him, Richard Platt, seated in the upper circle.
And him, Stephen Rees, typically seated in the cheap seat.
This is the Theatre Podcast, where we discuss productions we've seen,
Things we've liked,
and may not have liked,
giving our complete unprofessional
and non-biased opinions.
So grab a brew,
Take a seat,
and let's raise that curtain.
On today's episode, we'll be discussing Handbagged. We saw this production at the Studio Theatre at Leicester Curve on the 29th of March 2025. This Queen's Theatre Hornchurch and Theatre Nation partnership production explores the intense relationship between two of history's most revered female leaders and the legacy they each left behind. So Richard, what's it all about?
Moira Buffini's clever and fiercely funny comedy is a fly-on-the-wall look at what might have happened when Queen Elizabeth II and Margaret Thatcher came face-to-face in the privacy of the palace. Over the course of a decade, this play explores whether the monarch and the Iron Lady herself ever found common ground, or did their stiff upper lips reign supreme.
But first, our post-show opinion!
I think we found some treasure in these handbags.
A fun, witty and clever piece of theatre.
So, with all that said, let's
Set the scene. Richard, would you like to set the scene and describe the set for our listening viewers? And please, if you haven't done so already, please like, share, follow, subscribe,
Describe.
Supply us with theatre tickets and everything else. I'm really not good at this stuff. But anyway, yeah, if you could do all that, that would be wonderful. We've just passed the 1,000 follower marks. Oh, Mark, there's only one Mark.
Who's Mark?
I don't know. So yes, if you wouldn't mind doing something, that'd be nice. So go on then. Get on with it.
As we walked into Leicester's Curve, into the Leicestershire Curve.
Leicestershire.
No, as we walked into Leicester Curve, we were in the Studio Theatre, which is the smaller of the two venues, and we took our seats and we were presented with a stage that was basically looked like £2 coins, one suspended from the ceiling at an angle, and the other was on the floor as the stage area, with what looked like two clothes horses or clothes racks with all the different clothes on one on stage right, one on stage left, and then you had the basic theatre ropes hanging down from the back, all tied up just to almost imitate that you were backstage in a theatre. It wasn't meant to. It was bringing theatre forward in a way.
I think it sort of meant to impersonate that these conversations were held backstage.
Yes, yeah, it was behind the scenes, and also then there was a few what I'd say as old schoolroom chairs, your sort of metal frame with wood on them just at the back where supporting actors would be sat and used when they were in between scenes, really. Very similar to a bare stage production where you have a few seats at the back where people wait until they go on. So it's almost recreating that feel. And then throughout the production there was there was ornate chairs brought out to symbolise the back room of the Queen's residence, just to show where you were and where you were having these discussions, really. So
yeah, it just felt fitting to what it was.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was about these two women who were technically at the time two heads of state.
Yes.
In some way. So obviously had the mirror effect of the pound coins and the Queen's head being on it as well, and the whole aesthetic look, and it just felt right and it felt good.
Yes.
But it had a what set it apart was the fact that it was called Handbagged because the ladies had the handbags as well, and it sort of gives it a bit of a tongue in cheek about two powerful women, but centering it on not centering it on, but there were sort of it was sort of like the motif of the woman.
They were aesthetically very similar, as you know.
Yeah, but I meant like the whole point of it being, and the title being, about like a handbag.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like very stereotypical, but that's what it is. And
whereas the men it'd be a briefcase, and with the women it's two handbags, and it's very symbolic, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think as well, before we move on, there was LED lights hidden in the pound that was suspended from the ceiling, but there was also lights around the edges of the floor, the floor staging part. So it just gave some lift to the stage, just to illuminate and elevate it really. And like you say, it was a symbolism of what happens behind the scenes, where it's very well known that the Queen's met quite a lot of different prime ministers throughout her life, and the conversation she has, she's the person that maybe asks the questions that others will never, or things that even in this production we find a glimpse of it. We don't know to this day what's been discussed behind closed doors. So this is just to look into that world that we don't see.
Sort of going on the assumption that these two ladies hated each other or didn't like each other, because I suppose it also ties into the title again of like Handbags at Dawn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah. But I think throughout the whole production, it talks about their relationship and how they have different beliefs, and and the fact that they overcome those beliefs.
Yeah.
They might not even have to like each other, but at the very core and essence, they respect each other.
Exactly. They have to find a common ground to discuss things, because, like with other prime ministers, they've got to. It's the Queen's duty is to do what she's done and hold counsel with them. So she's got to find some way to. I suppose everybody needs a different perspective or opinion to follow through what they're dealing with in the outside world. So it's a sort of an unwritten camaraderie, as well as these are two people that have got to find some form of ground, really.
Yeah.
Moving on to our next segment, as we say, we're here for the drama.
This production covers the majority of the time of Margaret Thatcher's rise to power and post, because what you have or presented with are two of the most iconic ladies in the UK that we've known at the end of their premiership, you could say. And they talk to us as if they're in the room with us. And they talk at their younger selves as the younger selves go through the storyline of what happens. So that covers quite a lot of things, from getting into power, dealing with the strikes with Labour, the miners, and then the Falklands War, and so on and so forth, and dealing with the section of Reagan, the influence from America. And then it touches upon Section 28 as well. So it does cover quite a lot of very important topics. But I would say equally that it doesn't shy away from handing out insults to both sides of the political spectrum, and also getting a more grounded point of view of both aspects. So whilst you could say that those that didn't particularly like Thatcher was pleased, you also got the reasons why she did it, or because of how she saw things themselves, and why, because each political party or those in power have some form of reaction to the previous government and previous people. So you always have this sort of swing in the extremes or the opposite effect. But it was quite nice to see a rounded, excuse the pun, a rounded production dealing with all these aspects, as well as how Thatcher saw the Queen as being the head of state, and her following that of religion and bringing the church into the state. I mean, do you cut me off?
Yeah, well, I know, just letting you go. Yeah, you're doing all right. I think it's done very well in this production. There's almost a strange intensity about it, where the pace is really written well, where each scene is not overbearing, where they don't labour on everything too much. Yeah,
nothing drags either.
You feel like you're almost being taken on a whistle-stop tour of those years that they met each other, and the evolution of that relationship almost. Because even in normal families, there's always people that have to get along. It's almost like it's the family that you don't choose, but you've got to find some way of conversing and communicate with each other. Because it must have been, I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of things through history where you think to yourself, there's a lot of things that happen behind closed doors that none of us know about. None of us know about these conversations or, and
or what they really feel about something.
Well, yeah, exactly. And what is part of their party or their family that has to, they have to toe a line of some description. So you don't know, and it's nice to see a different perspective on that dynamic. Really,
it also picks up on assumptions. It'll follow along and showcasing what people assume the other people or person thinks of one. So you got a lot of what Thatcher assumed the Queen thought of her.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of cutback on that, and also the other way round.
Yeah.
So it's as if they listen to other people or the newspapers or whatever, tell them what the other person said, and they take assumptions from that.
And this was interesting. And this was in an era when the media was very controlled, and there was no social media out there. There was no, so what was written in the paper was believed. The written word was believed, when actually there was other things being discussed, and there was lots of other different perspectives thrown in, that actually what was being said in the newspapers might be different from what actually was said. But you got no other comparison. You got no recordings of that, or you got nobody there with a phone in somebody's face recording the conversations. It was what was written on a bit of paper, and people believed it. And there's so much more. And I think as well, it's very interesting to look at it, because there was obvious signs of almost railroading from men in their lives. There was times when they would have to keep pushing back, where they'd been tested and pushed to their limit almost, and there was obvious signs of that throughout their lives, that they'd both equally faced male dominance and they'd had to fend it off almost.
Yeah, and I think what I enjoyed about this was how clever and funny and at times witty the writing was.
Yeah.
Whilst going in depth, it didn't feel like it was a bore fest or some kind of PowerPoint presentation.
No,
or
exactly.
Rattling off particular political point scoring things or making one feel bad about the other. It justified its position, and I think it did it well. And what I extremely liked about the clever use of the comedic language, more the wit and the dry sense of humour, was having that expressed through the Queen.
Yes.
The old Queen, for example, played a wonderful part of warming the audience up and getting their attention and their understanding of what was to come on board. So you sort of were guided by the Queen's hand, the mature, later in her years Queen, as she did it sort of like tongue in cheek, or how if Thatcher said something, she said, "I don't remember that."
Yeah.
Or it might have been on your part, or and a lot of the audiences were laughing at that because it was typical British sense of humour, but it made the Queen more relatable to that what we'd ever have known. We know a lot more of Thatcher probably than
it was the little witty winks of "told you so" moments, or like, well, I said that'd happen, and here we are, it's little, but it was those little moments of but wink, nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
Exactly, but even if the Queen was in the wrong, she'd say something like, "I'm still living here," but it was very much like, "Well, what happened for such and such a reason?" She brushed it off.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as if like Thatcher was always in the wrong.
No, exactly.
So it made it more balanced and more enjoyable.
I think as well, to write in the almost subconscious element of two other people that played the Queen and Thatcher, to give that undertone of what they're really thinking compared to what they're saying to each other, that helped add some more depth to it as well, because you'd got the sort of subliminal undercurrent of what they wanted to really say. And
there was a lot of subtext going on, but sometimes it was covered in a lot of surface level banter.
Yeah,
At
exactly.
times,
Yeah,
whether that's on what someone wore or how they wore it, or anything.
yeah, because there was a few
surface level.
references where the Queen was convinced she was trying to Thatcher was trying to turn herself into another queen, or there was like little moments of like, she's literally copying me, it's like, but that's only natural for somebody to think that, isn't it?
Yeah. So in terms of the writing, I felt it was really well done. The thing is, whenever I come to see shows which are slightly verging on politics, or anything that's got someone that's stand outish, or someone who's slightly controversial, shall we say, and because it features Thatcher, I mean, love her or loathe her, she was quite influential, and she was quite strong in her opinions, and at least she stood for something. Whereas a lot of the politicians these days are flip flopping right, left, and centre. That it's hard to get a grasp as to who they are, rather than just being in there to feather their own nests.
Well, they're just there as spokespeople and say what needs to be said. And
exactly,
that's
who's buying them to say such and such. Whereas at least politicians from the past, they stood for something.
Yeah.
But whenever, as I was going to say, like whenever you've got someone like Thatcher who's quite controversial, I always assume or feel uneasy. Like, is this going to be a bashing? Is this play going to start bashing someone?
Or is it
just because their politics are either out of date now or whatever?
Or is it going to stand back and look at it for what it is?
Exactly. And put it in perspective and understand why they're saying things and so on and so forth. And for this play, I was actually relieved because they did it really well.
Yeah, they did.
Because there's nothing worse than actually seeing something where someone's banging on the soapbox. I like to see both sides and judge for myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas a lot of times you don't normally get that. It's very much echo chamber, this or that, from both sides. So it's nice to actually see a piece where both ladies were given enough respect for who they are individually.
Yeah, exactly.
And even at the end of that, like I said, the play resolved itself by saying, well, at least at the end they respected each other for who they are.
Yeah, and it didn't need to go into the detail at the end of the right and wrongs. It just drifted away, which is what it needed to do, leave people to make their own, to draw a conclusion from what they've just seen, rather than, a total, it didn't, it just presented you with everything and that was it,
Absolutely, yeah. What I would say as well, you also had a couple of other people come on board playing various other roles. So you had Dennis Herdman playing the actor, and he popped up as Ronald Reagan. He played Margaret Thatcher's husband, and I can't think now if he played Prince Philip as well, but he was playing so many different parts. He was quite funny because the play itself lent on its own silliness in the way it went, and so it referenced the fact that he was playing two parts as well. Yeah. Likewise, Cassius Kona, he also played those kind of duplicate roles as well, and made fun and references to certain things going on.
Yeah, and they had a bit of a falling out because one of them wanted to play the other part, and they the two guys, they wanted to play different parts. And
I think one of them played Enoch Powell. He played Enoch Powell, didn't he?
Yeah, and he didn't want to.
Because he was a black actor. The irony there with Enoch Powell was quite funny within itself, outside of the play, but within the staged world. So that was quite funny and interesting. And
it was nice that it was written bits that didn't feel like written. It felt like it was actually them thinking about what they're doing. It's like, it feels... It was a break out of the fourth wall that felt really like natural.
It wasn't necessarily Panto-esque.
No.
But the bits where it's very much tongue-in-cheek, I'll just say this here, outside of the play world, but then we'll pop back in again and carry on. So it never really... and
the rest of the characters reacted equally. It wasn't just him. They all fueled the fire, as it were. Yeah.
So it was all good fun, really. And the younger versions of the Queen and Margaret Thatcher was also quite endearing to watch, because in some aspects they weren't the butt of the joke.
No.
They weren't holding jokes or whatever. They had the serious role to
exactly.
do to just depict what was happening in certain time frames of the play.
I like the moments where they switched between, so they would become centre stage as young Queen and Thatcher at certain points, and the older ones would be the Consciences, and then they switched again to be the older Queen and Thatcher, and they would be the Consciences, and it was nice the way it flipped, really,
and how it was staged directorially as well, and how everyone was performing. Like you say, they were the Conscience, so you did often have the older versions of them on the shoulders, not literally, but behind the shoulders,
exactly.
saying things, throwing insults, or adding little jibes, or telling what actually really happened.
Yeah.
So that was quite good.
Yeah, I like that.
In terms of the directing overall, I thought it was really well done.
Yeah.
For considering they had very little stage.
Yes.
It was all pretty much done on the pound. That might have been the budget as well, but pretty much everything was tightly directed. It was really well directed,
yeah, it was.
And nothing felt uneasy at all.
Because you're almost doing a play within a play, really, because you've got these Consciences that are offering quick-witted responses at the speed of other things happening. So it's like there's so many things to consider. There's so many little intricate bits, because when we say they were like Consciences, they were like the shadow walking around all the time. They were always there. They were always on stage. They didn't leave stage until the interval, and that's even if they were just right at the back at stage, or there was a moment where the old Queen had just winked to the audience as she's trying to almost move a chair or tidy up, or something was happening, she'd be having a little reaction to keep everybody focused, or and
I think she played mum.
Yeah,
in a way, thinking about it, because when I said earlier how I know, sort of like going back again, but how she got the audience on her side with her sense of humour and everything.
Yeah.
Because she was like apolitical in a way. She was in like no man's land as to what her thoughts was. She gained the attention of the audience because you couldn't actually get on the good side of Thatcher, because it was sort of like at times you felt it was against Thatcher, but she had to give a reason as well as for whatever she did, an explanation, or she was trying to reason with the audience. So you couldn't necessarily have her then start being all jokey and wink, because that would probably put a lot of people's backs up.
Yeah, exactly.
So in essence, it sort of softens people towards her as a woman and as a woman in power at a time where it was very difficult.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think because the play is about respect, I think it was really sensitively handled.
There was one bit that I think I need to bring up that I think you mostly comment on. You commented on more than I did, but I see your point, and that was the music used in between the scenes, where it was just too much and too...
Oh, do you know what? I completely forgot about that. Yes. In between each scene changeover, they started singing, didn't they?
Yeah.
I completely forgot all about that.
Yeah, it was like a musical moment that wasn't needed.
Yes,
almost.
that was very strange and odd.
It didn't have... I don't know why. It just didn't feel like it had a place in it, in a way.
Yeah, slightly forced.
Yeah.
And awkward. It came across as slightly awkward, I remember.
Yeah, it was. It was awkward. It was a little... Because it went on a bit too long as well.
Yeah, and it was like they were half-assed singing.
Yeah.
So are they actually supposed to be singing to this?
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Is it miming or what? I think, I mean, thanks for bringing this up to me.
That's
Otherwise, I would have given it a 10.
No, exactly.
Going down now.
But no, it was one of those... but it was one of those moments that was just a weird decision.
Yes.
Maybe for performing rights, they couldn't use the real songs or something, but it just felt, like you said, it was an awkward bit. It was awkward.
Because I don't think those bits were needed.
No.
Not really.
Or if you're going
to have one, if you're going to have it once.
Yeah.
But I think it was a couple of times, wasn't it?
Yeah, it did feel weird.
But then again, clearly, if I've forgotten it after all this time, mind you, I do forget a lot of things, then it wasn't like a lasting impression. It wouldn't have been a lasting impression.
No.
But I remember it now.
Yeah.
Just in time for the point system. Anyway,
exactly.
I have to give a big shout out to Sarah Moyle as the Queen.
Yes, she was
Mumsy,
brilliant.
the old Queen.
She was brilliant.
Simply because whilst everyone was just as good, she had the nuances down. She had the voice down. She had that rebellious queen nature.
Yeah, she did.
That it just
that twinkle. It was that twinkle in her eye that
could have really landed really badly had it been done wrong or just not bothered. But she just made it lovable. Where if it weren't for her, we probably wouldn't have gone on this journey.
No, and
enjoyed it as well as we did.
I think it was the sparkle in her eye, the glimmer.
It was definitely that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and she just one look at the audience, and she'd won us over. It's like it's amazing, really. That's a special quality.
Yeah, it's very rare to see that. So that's my shout out. But all the cast were great.
Oh yeah, they were. Yeah, definitely.
I felt the voices for Thatcher especially was really good, coming from Morag Cross, who we saw. She was really. She had the strain in her voice. I mean, that must have hurt for a long time. But
yeah, definitely.
To have that that kind of Margaret Thatcher tone, and even the young ones as well.
I think Helen Rubin and Emma Ernest, who played the younger versions,
yes,
were brilliant. It was almost like you saw the prelude to what they became.
And they didn't play it like older ladies either.
No, they seemed like the younger versions, and they were definitely different to the older counterparts.
Because incidentally, Margaret Thatcher had speech therapy, didn't she? She had speech lessons. So the young one didn't necessarily start speaking in a certain way.
No, exactly.
She still started off by just speaking normally, as normally as she did.
Yeah,
put it that way.
And also Cassius and Dennis, when they played different roles, they picked out definite differences that you could tell that they were doing different parts with just one item of clothing, because there was one wore a different suit jacket, or one wore a different coat or a hat, or it just helped give you that little difference on stage. And
also with Dennis, he had an awful lot of costume changes and quick tempo just changes instantly.
Yeah, exactly.
Just the way he just went from one to the other straight away on the turn. That was and to remember those lines as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Successively, I think.
And then also break the wall as well by talking to fall out with them as actors, and then it was and then back into being a cast member and stuff.
Yeah, so that was just wonderful.
Yeah, it was
to see, and they were all just brilliant.
Yeah.
Now then,
I know. Sorry, just before we move on.
Okay. Yeah.
And also to Alex Thorpe for directing it. I know we probably didn't name drop him earlier.
Oh, no, we didn't at all. No,
but Alex Thorpe, to pull all this together and create a piece of theatre that's actually quite strong, hats off to him, because he's done a good job. He's done a
really good job for Moira's work. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Whilst we're on the subject of cast, I don't think they were the cast, but there was a slightly awkward, weird scene where they were putting stuff on or taking things off.
Yeah.
It was like a transition thing that just seemed to take ages, or just wasn't.
There was a few clunky moments on set changes rather than placing things and walking off, or it just felt a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and was there? I'm imagining it. Or was there a bit where one of the stage hands asking a question what to do or where to go?
Yeah, it looked a bit awkward. It was. There was a couple of awkward moments.
Yeah, but I don't think they're in the touring production of it. I think they probably were from the Curve.
Yeah.
So that was just a bit of okay, right, fair enough.
Moving on to our next segment, as we say, what the tech is this?
So overall, the technical side, it was just simple lighting, I suppose. There wasn't anything outlandishly.
No, but it was focused. It was not. And I'm talking focused in a way of the production was very much focused on this pound coin, and it felt exposed as a production, but in a nice way. It was quite. Yeah, no, I liked it, and I liked the little accents of the LEDs in the base, and also in the project in the pound coin itself, because there was elements of world map, and then there was elements of stars and stripes for the American part, and then there was so you got a few moments that just elevated it, but it wasn't overdone.
Didn't it change? Did it fill up with something? Did it?
Yeah, no, yeah. The Queen wasn't there, and then they removed. It was all project. It was all filled with light, so you couldn't see the pound coin at one point.
And now it's time for
Rewind, Rewatch.
For me, I would actually come and see it again, but I can't really think of a particular scene I'd like to rewind and rewatch because I think it wasn't written like that. It wasn't like segmented where one particular scene outstood over anything else. It was all consistently good.
Yeah, and I'd back that up because I'd see it all again because I think you'd pick out different things when you see it again. I would like the musical bits to change, but other than that, I think other than that, the production as a whole, I like the style of it. I think,
Yeah.
Moving on to our final segment, as we say,
Call this a show?
A great, clever piece of theatre, really. I think to recreate this from something from 2015 that was, I feel like it's at the same level as it must have been then.
Yeah.
It's very different, very, very easy to water it down or to think twice about how to do it. And I feel like they kept it very true to the subject matter. And it's almost like you can't really mess with icons. And good or bad, icons are icons. They have to have this. It's very easy to become a spitting image of it rather than a view of what actually these people were. So you've really got to be quite strong on that. So yeah, well done.
Yeah, this was just a wonderful, intimate piece of theatre. Small amount of set, small amount of cast. It's easy to do. It was just really enjoyable. It was really strong writing, really good performances, and I think it held up because of the performances as well. Because if you're portraying these iconic people, not just your Ronald Reagans or your Enoch Powells or everybody else who has a certain way of speaking, you've also got you mostly got the Queen and Mrs. Thatcher as well. So they have their own speech patterns. They speak in a certain way. They look a certain way. And that's where it's at, really, in those two ladies. And this show nailed it for
Definitely.
me. Scores then, please, Richard, for Handbagged. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being a play that is for turning heads, and 1 being a waste of a good handbag. What's it going to be?
Well, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10.
And I think I'm going to match you with that 8 as well.
Oh, I'm going to raise you for an 8.
So, what sound effect will you be choosing from the following? A complete train wreck? Tumbleweed? An audible shrug of the shoulders? A slow clap? A pleasant applause? Or a standing ovation? What will it be?
I give a standing ovation.
And I'm going to give this a standing ovation as well.
Oh, super duper.
So there we are. That's our discussion of Handbagged. We hope you found it insightful.
If not, entertaining.
Stay tuned as we bring you more of our thoughts
And opinions
on many theatrical delights in future episodes.
If you'd like to get in touch, email us at upstagedownsstagepod@gmail.com. You can always join in the chat to share with us your views of a production.
Also, make sure to follow, share, like and subscribe to all our channels so you get every episode the second it's released. And we hope you join us again for another instalment of Upstage Downstage. On today's episode, we'll be discussing Handbagged. Is it handbagged? Just handbagged. Glad ragged. A handbag. On today's episode, we'll be discussing hanged bag. No, not hang.
Hanged bagged.
On today's episode, we'll be discussing handbagged. Am I saying it right?
You did handbagged then.
Handbagged.
Handbagged.
Handbagged. On today's episode, we'll be discussing on today's come on.
Enunciate, dear.
I'm not a nun.
Or a C8.
On today's episode, we'll be discussing Handbagged. We saw this production at the Studio Theatre at Leicester Curve. No, it's not Leicestershire. Leicestershire. Where did I go on that? I don't know what that accent
Where have you gone all West Country?
I don't know. We don't know, you see. It's what happens when you go to Leicestershire. We saw this production at the Studio Theatre at Leicester. That was correct. At Leicester Curve. This Queen's Theatre Hornchurch and Theatre Nation Partnerships production explores the intense relationship between two of history's most revered female leaders. Shall I do that one again? This Queen's Theatre Hornchurch...
Sorry. Moira Buffini's clever...
Moira Buffini isn't as bad as your Buffini.
Right. Moira Buffini's clever... Is it Buffini?
Buffini.
Buffini. Moira Buffini's clever... Let's say that. Moira.
Buffini.
Moira Rose's clever and fiercely funny comedy.
Moira Rose. Clever and fiercely funny comedy.
Baby.
Is that flight on the wall?
Look at what have happened to when Queen Elizabeth and Margaret Thatcher came face to face.
Buffini.
Moira Buffini's clever and fearless... I can't even get it out.
Fiercely funny.
Moira Buffini's clever and fiercely...
You always start off with an exhale. Moira.
Being husky. That's probably why I run out of breath, because I already got rid of it.
Yeah.
Moira Buffini's clever and fiercely funny comedy. I'm not going to fucking do this, am I?
Moira Buffini.
Moira Buffini's clever and fiercely funny comedy is a fly on the wall look at what might have happened. I've run out of breath.
Scores then please, Richard, for Handbagged. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being a play that is for turning heads, and 1 being let ourselves not take ourselves... Scores then please, Richard, for Handbagged. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being a play that is for turning heads, and 1 being... I've completely forgot it.
Moira Buffini's clever and fiercely funny comedy is a fly on the wall look at what might have happened when Queen is the Queen's...
Come in a jinx of your heart.
This is 7. Moira Buffini's clever and fiercely funny comedy is a fly on the wall look at what might have happened when Queen Elizabeth II... What was that? Elizabeth? Lilibet.
And Margaret Thatcher the First. A handbag. It's a Buffini handbag.
Oh, I only use the Buffini for special occasions. Oh, God. He's not going to help. Moira Buffini's clever and fiercely funny comedy is a fly on the wall. It's a fly long again. Moira Buffini's clever and fiercely funny comedy is a fly on the wall look at what might have happened when clean. Over the course of a decade, this play explores whether the monarch and the Iron Lady herself ever found the common... I can't not get your poem. Over the course of a decade, this play explores whether...
Do you want to breathe?
Well, I need to burp. Over the course of a decade, this play explores... Over the course of a decade, this play explores whether the monarch and the Iron Lady herself ever found common ground, or did their stiff upper lips reign supreme? Or did their stiff upper lips reign supreme? I'm going to do the last bit again.
I think you should.
Over the course of a decade, this play explores whether the monarch and the Iron Lady herself ever found common ground, or did their stiff upper lips reign supreme?
Did they put their stiff upper lips together?
So with all that said...
Someone stiff upper lip with their stiff bottom lip. I should know. No.